On the night of September 29th, 1913, one of the world's greatest inventors boarded a steamship bound for England. He enjoyed dinner with fellow passengers, spoke about business, retired for the evening, and vanished. His cabin remained untouched. His bed had never been slept in. His hat and overcoat were discovered neatly folded on deck. By sunrise, Rudolf Diesel had disappeared. More than a century later, historians still debate what happened aboard the Dresden that night. Was it suicide, a tragic accident, industrial sabotage, or murder? To answer those questions, we first have to understand the man. Rudolf Christian Karl Diesel was born on March 18, 1858, in Paris, France. His parents were German immigrants who had settled there, seeking opportunity during Europe's rapid industrial expansion. His father, Theodor, operated a leather goods workshop. His mother, Elise, placed enormous value on education. From an early age, Rudolf displayed an unusual talent for mathematics and mechanics. He constantly asked how machines worked and why they couldn't work better. When the Franco-Prussian War began in 1870, the family was forced to leave France. Rudolf eventually settled in Augsburg, Germany, where he continued his education. Despite the upheaval, he excelled in school and earned admission to the Royal Bavarian Polytechnic in Munich. There he studied under Professor Carl von Linde, one of Europe's leading engineers and a pioneer of refrigeration technology. Linde's lectures introduced Diesel to thermodynamics, the science of heat, pressure, and energy. One problem immediately captured his imagination. Steam engines powered nearly every factory, railway, and ship in the industrial world. Yet they were remarkably inefficient. Most of the energy released by burning coal escaped as wasted heat. Only a small percentage became useful work. Diesel believed there had to be a better solution. After graduating with highest honours, he accepted a position with Linde's engineering company. The work was rewarding, but his real passion began after hours. Night after night, he filled notebooks with calculations. He studied pressure, combustion, fuel efficiency, and entirely new approaches to engine design. His goal was ambitious. Instead of producing power with steam, he wanted an engine that created enormous pressure directly inside the cylinder, allowing fuel to ignite without a spark. Many engineers considered the idea unrealistic. Diesel refused to abandon it. Years of experiments followed. Some prototypes failed completely. One exploded during testing, seriously injuring him. The accident nearly ended both his career and his life. But after recovering, he returned to the workshop. He redesigned components, improved materials, refined his calculations. Each failure brought him closer to success. Finally, in 1897, after nearly 10 years of development, Rudolf Diesel unveiled a working engine unlike anything the world had seen. By compressing air to extremely high pressure before injecting fuel, the engine achieved remarkable efficiency. It consumed significantly less fuel than contemporary steam engines while producing reliable mechanical power. Industrial leaders immediately recognized its potential. Factories adopted the new technology. Power plants installed diesel engines. Shipbuilders saw an opportunity to replace enormous steam machinery with something lighter and more efficient. Within only a few years, Diesel's invention became one of the most important engineering breakthroughs of the Industrial Revolution. Licensing agreements made him wealthy. Governments invited him to lecture. Investors competed to finance new engine factories across Europe. By the early 20th century, Rudolf Diesel had become internationally famous. But success brought pressure. His business empire grew increasingly complex, patent disputes multiplied, financial commitments expanded across several countries. Behind the public image of the celebrated inventor, new challenges were beginning to emerge, challenges that would ultimately place Rudolf Diesel aboard a ship crossing the North Sea, and into one of history's most enduring mysteries. By 1913, Rudolf Diesel was one of the most recognizable engineers in the world. His engine had revolutionized industry. Factories relied on it. Power plants adopted it. Navies across Europe began exploring its military potential. The future seemed secure. But behind the scenes, Diesel's personal life was becoming increasingly complicated. Although his inventions had generated enormous wealth, much of his fortune existed only on paper. He invested heavily in new ventures, he financed ambitious engineering projects, he purchased property and supported companies across Europe. When several investments failed, his financial position became increasingly unstable. At the same time, Europe itself stood on the edge of profound change. Relations between the great powers were deteriorating. Britain and Germany were engaged in an intense naval arms race. Military planners recognized that diesel engines could transform modern warfare. Unlike coal-fired steam engines, diesel-powered ships required fewer crew members, consumed less fuel, and could travel greater distances without refueling. Several governments were eager to secure access to Diesel's technology. On September 29, 1913, Rudolf Diesel arrived in Antwerp, Belgium. He was preparing to board the steamship Dresden for an overnight voyage to Harwich, England. From there, he planned to travel to London for meetings with the Consolidated Diesel Manufacturing Company and discussions related to new engine production. Before boarding, Diesel mailed a letter to his wife. He also handed a sealed package to a trusted associate with specific instructions. The package was not to be opened unless he failed to return. No one aboard the ship found this unusual at the time. Passengers settled into their cabins. Dinner was served. According to those who shared the meal with Diesel, he appeared calm, pleasant, and fully engaged in conversation. He discussed engineering, business opportunities, and the meetings awaiting him in England. Nothing suggested he expected anything unusual to happen. Around 10 o'clock that evening, Diesel excused himself. He told his companions he was retiring for the night. Before leaving, he asked to be awakened at 6:15 the following morning. It would be the last confirmed sighting of Rudolf Diesel. When a steward knocked on his cabin door the next morning, there was no answer. Eventually the door was opened. The room appeared almost untouched. The bed had not been slept in. His nightshirt had been carefully laid out. His pocket watch rested neatly on a table. Personal belongings remained exactly where they should have been. Nothing indicated a struggle. Nothing suggested the cabin had been hastily abandoned. Crew members immediately began searching the ship. Soon, another discovery deepened the mystery. On an outer deck, Diesel's hat and neatly folded overcoat were found resting near the rail. No witnesses reported hearing a disturbance during the night. No passenger remembered seeing him after he left dinner. The Dresden had sailed through darkness across the North Sea, while one of the world's most famous inventors simply disappeared. An extensive search of the vessel produced nothing. There was no sign of Rudolf Diesel, no farewell note, no damaged railing, no evidence explaining how he had vanished. Days later, a body was spotted floating in the North Sea by the crew of a Dutch pilot boat. Following maritime custom of the time, the badly decomposed body was not recovered. Instead, sailors removed several personal items before committing the remains to the sea. Among them were a wallet, a pill case, a pocket knife, and a spectacle case. When these belongings were later shown to Rudolf Diesel's son, he identified them as his father's. Yet even this discovery failed to answer the central question. How had one of history's greatest inventors disappeared from a passenger ship without anyone seeing what happened? The investigation had only just begun. News of Rudolf Diesel's disappearance spread rapidly across Europe. Newspapers immediately offered competing explanations. Some believed the answer was obvious. Others argued the truth had been deliberately concealed. More than a century later, the same debate continues. The official explanation has often been suicide. Investigators discovered that Diesel had been under significant financial pressure. Although celebrated around the world, several of his investments had failed. Business records suggested he was carrying substantial debt. When his family later examined his personal diary, they found a single X marked on September 29, 1913. Some interpreted it as a final farewell. The sealed package he had left with his associate contained financial documents and personal papers. To many historians, these details suggested a man putting his affairs in order. But the suicide theory raises difficult questions. Witnesses who dined with Diesel that evening described him as relaxed and optimistic. He spoke enthusiastically about future meetings in England and ongoing engineering projects. Nothing in his behaviour convinced fellow passengers that he intended to end his life only hours later. Another possibility is far less dramatic. The North Sea crossing was rough that evening. Some researchers believe Diesel simply stepped onto the dark outer deck for fresh air. Passenger ships of the early 20th century lacked many of the safety features common today. A single unexpected wave, a slippery deck, or a momentary loss of balance could have sent him overboard unnoticed, without surveillance cameras, electronic tracking, or continuous deck patrols. Such an accident might never have been witnessed. Yet another theory points toward murder. By 1913, Diesel's engine had become one of the most strategically important technologies in the world. Several European navies were replacing coal-fired engines with diesel power. Military planners recognized that whoever controlled this technology could gain an enormous advantage. Some historians have wondered whether industrial rivals or even government agents might have wanted Diesel silenced before valuable contracts were signed. No credible evidence has ever confirmed such a plot. No witnesses reported suspicious activity aboard the Dresden. No contemporary investigation uncovered proof of sabotage. Still, the timing has fueled speculation for generations, especially because Europe would descend into the First World War less than a year later. Other theories are even more extraordinary. Some writers have suggested Diesel staged his own disappearance to escape financial ruin. Others have imagined secret intelligence operations or elaborate conspiracies stretching across Europe. These ideas have inspired countless books and documentaries, but they share one critical weakness: evidence. None has produced reliable historical documentation supporting its claims. Today, most historians narrow the possibilities to two: suicide or accidental drowning. Unfortunately, the available evidence cannot distinguish between them with certainty. The body was never formally examined. The original investigation was limited by the standards of 1913. Many important questions simply could not be answered. Perhaps That is why Rudolf Diesel's disappearance continues to fascinate historians. His story combines remarkable innovation, international politics, financial success, personal struggle, and an unexplained disappearance at sea. His invention transformed transportation, shipping, construction, agriculture, power generation, and eventually millions of vehicles around the world. Today, more than a century after he vanished, his name remains attached to one of history's most important engines. Yet the final chapter of his own life remains unwritten. History remembers Rudolf Diesel as the inventor who changed the modern world, but it still cannot explain how one of its greatest engineers disappeared into the darkness of the North Sea and was never seen alive again. Join our quest for answers by subscribing to our channel. If you enjoyed unraveling the mystery in this video, please click the like button. Most of all, thank you for watching.